When I bought my first caravan, I thought the hardest part would be towing it. I was wrong. It wasn't the towing, it wasn't the setup, and it definitely wasn't choosing where to travel. The hardest part was trying to understand everything that came with owning a caravan. There were so many new terms, new systems, new routines, and honestly, there were moments when I wondered if everyone else knew something that I didn't. If you're feeling like that right now, don't worry, you're not alone. Every experienced caravaner has been a beginner. Every one of us has stood in front of a caravan wondering, what does that switch do? Why is that light flashing? How does this system actually work? In this video, I want to share some of the caravan things that confused me at first, not because I was doing something wrong, but because nobody had explained them in simple language. Hopefully, by the end of this video, some of those confusing moments will make a lot more sense for you. Let's start with one of the biggest, caravan weight terminology. When I first heard people talking about ATM, GTM, tare weight, and payload, it honestly sounded like another language. Everyone seemed to throw these terms around as if they were obvious. Meanwhile, I was quietly wondering what any of them actually meant. The good news is that once someone explains them properly, they're not nearly as complicated as they first appear. They're simply different ways of measuring how much your caravan weighs under different conditions. Once I understood that, everything became much easier. Another thing that confused me was how much weight adds up. You look around your house and think, I'll just pack a few things. Then suddenly you've added clothes, food, water, camping chairs, tools, outdoor tables, cooking equipment, batteries, and before long you've added hundreds of kilograms without even realizing it. That surprised me. Now let's talk about water. This was another lesson I learned very quickly. Water is heavy, very heavy. It's easy to forget that every liter of water weighs about 1 kilogram. Fill a couple of large water tanks and you've suddenly added a significant amount of weight to your caravan. Once I understood that, I became much more aware of traveling with only the amount of water I actually needed. Now here's another thing that confused me. Power. When I first stepped inside the caravan, I assumed every power point worked all the time. It doesn't. Some power points only work when you're connected to mains power. Others may be powered differently depending on your caravan's electrical setup. Understanding when you're using 240-volt power and when you're using your battery system takes a little time. Once you learn how your own caravan is wired, it becomes second nature. But in the beginning, it can definitely feel confusing. Now let's talk about batteries. I used to think a battery simply meant electricity. Then I learned about battery capacity, charging, solar panels, battery management. Suddenly there was a whole new world to understand. The important lesson I eventually learned was that every caravan setup is different. Some caravans are designed mainly for caravan parks. Others are equipped for extended free camping. Understanding your own setup is far more important than comparing it with someone else's. Now here's another thing that confused me, leveling the caravan. At first I thought it was just about making the caravan look level. Then I realized it affects much more than that. Sleeping comfortably, using the shower, doors closing properly, even cooking can become easier when the caravan is level. It quickly became part of my normal setup routine. Now let's talk about storage. I remember thinking, this caravan has heaps of storage. Then I started packing. Suddenly every cupboard was full. The surprising thing wasn't how little storage there was. It was how much unnecessary gear I thought I needed. Over time, I realized that carrying less often made caravanning much easier. The more organized I became, the more enjoyable each trip became. Now here's one final thing that really confused me, the number of opinions. Ask 10 caravanners the same question and you might receive 10 different answers. Which tire pressure is best? What's the perfect towing speed? Should you free camp or stay in caravan parks? Which accessories are essential? Everyone has an opinion. Eventually I realized something important. There isn't always one correct answer. The best answer often depends on your caravan, your tow vehicle, your travel style, and your personal preferences. That was one of the biggest lessons I learned. You don't have to copy everyone else. You simply need to understand your own setup and keep learning from every trip, because once the confusing parts begin to make sense, caravanning becomes one of the most enjoyable ways to explore Australia. Now, let's talk about something that confused me every single time I arrived at a campsite, setting everything up. When I first started caravanning, it felt like there were 100 things to remember. Where do I park? Do I level the caravan first? When do I put the stabilizer legs down? Should I connect the power before the water? It felt like I needed a checklist just to get through the first 15 minutes. The funny thing is, after a few trips, it all became routine. I realized there wasn't one perfect order. The important thing was creating a routine and following it every time. Now I hardly have to think about it. The next thing that confused me was the stabilizer legs. At first, I honestly thought they were designed to lift and level the caravan. They're not. Their job is simply to reduce movement once the caravan has already been leveled. Understanding that one simple fact made setting up much easier. Now let's talk about connecting to power. The first few times I plugged into mains power, I found myself double checking everything. Was the power switched on? Had I connected the lead correctly? Why wasn't a particular appliance working? It turned out that most of the confusion came from simply not knowing my caravan's electrical system. Once I spent a little time reading the manual and understanding how my setup worked, it all became much less intimidating. Now, here's another thing that caught me out: water connections. I assumed every caravan park had exactly the same tap fittings. Not even close. Different parks can have different fittings, water pressure, and layouts. After a couple of trips, I realized it was worth carrying a few extra hose fittings and connectors. They don't take up much room, but they can save a lot of frustration. Now let's talk about reversing into a campsite. I used to think everyone else could reverse perfectly on the first attempt. Then I started watching more closely. Even experienced caravanners occasionally stop, pull forward, and have another go. That completely changed my mindset. I realized reversing isn't about getting it perfect the first time. It's about taking your time and making safe adjustments. Now, here's another thing that confused me: the size of the caravan. Standing beside it at home, it looked enormous. But after towing it for a while, something interesting happened. It started feeling smaller, not because it changed size, because I became familiar with it. I learned where the wheels tracked. I became more comfortable judging corners. I understood how much room I needed. Confidence gradually replaced uncertainty. Now let's talk about mirrors. I thought towing mirrors were only for very experienced caravanners. Then I realized they were one of the most useful safety tools available. Being able to clearly see down both sides of the caravan makes towing far more comfortable and helps you stay aware of the traffic around you. Good visibility builds confidence. Now here's something else that surprised me: packing. Before my first trip, I packed almost everything I thought I might need. After a few trips, I realized I'd barely used half of it. Many new caravanners overpack because they're worried about forgetting something. Eventually, you learn what you actually use, and every trip becomes easier because you're carrying less. Now, let's talk about campsite etiquette. This was something I hadn't really thought about before buying a caravan. Things like driving slowly through caravan parks, keeping noise down at night, respecting neighbouring sites, leaving shared facilities clean. Most of these aren't complicated rules, they're simply good manners. And one of the nicest things about the caravanning community is that most people happily follow them. Finally, one of the biggest things that confused me was wondering whether I was doing it right. Was I setting up correctly? Was I traveling enough kilometers each day? Was I carrying the right equipment? Over time, I realized there isn't one perfect way to caravan. Some people love free camping, others prefer caravan parks. Some travel every weekend, others spend months on the road. Some like traveling light, others enjoy having more comforts. None of those approaches are wrong. The best caravanning style is the one that suits you. Once I stopped comparing myself to everyone else and focused on learning my own caravan and enjoying my own trips, caravanning became much more relaxing. And looking back now, Many of the things that once confused me have become simple everyday routines. That's the wonderful thing about experience. The more you travel, the less confusing everything becomes. Now, let's talk about something that confused me long before I even bought my caravan. Everyone seemed to have an opinion about what I absolutely needed. If you don't have this accessory, you'll regret it. You must buy this before your first trip. You can't caravan without one of these. The list seemed endless. Wheel chocks, leveling ramps, solar panels, generators, portable fridges, extra batteries, tire pressure monitors, tool kits, portable BBQs, camping furniture. The list just kept growing. At first, I honestly thought I needed everything. Then something interesting happened. I actually started traveling, and I realized that some items were incredibly useful for the way I traveled. Others stayed in the cupboard for trip after trip without ever being used. That taught me a valuable lesson. Buy equipment to solve a real problem, not because someone else says you need it. Now let's talk about free camping. This confused me in the beginning too. I imagined free camping meant pulling over anywhere and spending the night. Of course, that's not how it works. Some free camps are provided by local councils. Some are in designated rest areas. Others are low-cost camping areas with basic facilities. Each location has its own rules. Learning those rules takes time, but once you understand them, free camping becomes another enjoyable option. Now let's talk about caravan parks. One thing that surprised me was how different they all are. Some have large drive-through sites, others require careful reversing, some have excellent facilities, others are much more basic. After visiting a few different parks, I stopped expecting every place to be the same. Instead, I learned to adapt. That made traveling much easier. Now, here's another thing that confused me. Weather. I underestimated how much the weather could influence a caravan trip. Strong winds, heavy rain, extreme heat, cold mornings, they all affect your experience. Eventually, I learned that checking the weather before traveling is just as important as checking the road conditions. A little preparation makes a big difference. Now let's talk about fuel consumption. I knew towing would use more fuel. I just didn't realize how much more. Your towing vehicle is working much harder. There's more weight, more wind resistance, more effort required to maintain speed. After a few trips, I became much better at planning fuel stops and allowing for the extra fuel consumption that comes with towing. Now, here's another lesson. You don't need to know everything before your first trip. When I was starting out, I thought I had to understand every system, every accessory, and every situation before leaving home. The reality is much simpler. Learn the basics. Take your first trip. Learn something new. Then repeat the process. Every journey teaches you a little more. Trying to learn everything at once can actually make caravanning feel more overwhelming than it needs to be. Now let's talk about asking questions. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to look inexperienced, but I quickly discovered that the caravanning community is generally very welcoming. Most experienced caravanners are happy to share advice because they remember what it was like when they first started. Sometimes a simple conversation with another traveler can save hours of confusion. Now, here's something else that surprised me. The learning never really stops. Even experienced caravanners continue discovering better ways to do things. Better storage ideas, smarter packing methods, more efficient setup routines, safer towing habits. That's one of the things I enjoy most about caravanning. Every trip adds another lesson, every destination teaches you something different, and every year you become a little more confident than the year before. Eventually, you realize something important. The goal isn't knowing everything. The goal is enjoying the journey while continuing to learn. That's what makes caravanning such a rewarding lifestyle. The caravan itself doesn't become less complicated overnight. You simply become more familiar with it. And once that happens, many of the things that once seemed confusing become everyday habits that you hardly even think about. As we come to the end of this video, I want to leave you with something that completely changed the way I looked at caravanning. It's okay to be confused. In fact, if you're feeling confused, you're probably learning. Every new caravanner experiences that stage where almost everything feels unfamiliar. The switches, the water system, the electrical system, the towing, the setup. the terminology. It can feel like information overload. But here's what I've discovered: you don't need to learn everything in one weekend. Caravanning isn't an exam. Nobody expects you to know it all. You simply learn one lesson at a time, one trip at a time, one experience at a time. And before you know it, the things that once seemed complicated become second nature. Now, think about the first time you hooked your caravan onto your tow vehicle. You probably double checked everything, then checked it again. You may have wondered if the coupling was locked properly, if the safety chains were connected correctly, if the electrical plug was secure. Today, you probably complete those checks without even thinking about them, not because they've become less important, because they've become part of your routine. That's what experience does. Now let's talk about mistakes. One thing that confused me at first was believing I wasn't supposed to make any. The reality is that every caravanner has forgotten something. Most of us have left a cupboard unlocked, packed too much, taken a wrong turn, needed a second or third attempt to reverse into a campsite. Those moments don't mean you're failing, they mean you're learning. The important thing is to stay calm, fix the problem, and remember the lesson for next time. Now, here's something else that surprised me. The more I simplified things, the easier caravanning became. I stopped buying accessories I didn't need. I packed less gear. I created simple setup and pack up routines. I kept my storage organized. Instead of making caravanning more complicated, I looked for ways to make it simpler. That one change made a huge difference. Now let's talk about confidence. Confidence doesn't suddenly appear one morning. It's built slowly. Every successful trip adds another layer. Every campsite teaches you something. Every challenge you overcome becomes another skill you can use on future adventures. Then one day, you'll find yourself helping someone who's just bought their first caravan. You'll answer a question that once confused you, and you'll smile because you'll remember asking exactly the same thing. That's one of the best parts of the caravanning community. People help each other, they share ideas, they swap stories, and everyone continues learning together. Now, here's one final piece of advice. Don't let confusion stop you from traveling. It's easy to spend months watching videos, reading forums, and worrying about getting everything perfect. But the greatest teacher is experience. Go on that first weekend trip, stay at a nearby caravan park, practice your setup, learn your caravan, take notes if you need to, then go again. Every trip will feel easier than the one before, and before long you'll realize that what once felt confusing now feels completely normal. Caravanning isn't about knowing everything, it's about enjoying the journey while learning along the way. So if you're new to caravanning, be patient with yourself, ask questions, practice often. Don't compare yourself to people who've been doing it for years. Focus on becoming a little more confident after every trip, because every experienced caravanner was once standing exactly where you are today, feeling excited, feeling nervous, feeling a little confused, and wondering if they were doing it right. The answer is simple. If you're learning, you're doing it right. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep building your confidence. And most importantly, keep enjoying the incredible lifestyle that caravanning offers. Safe travels, enjoy every adventure, and I'll see you in the next Australian caravanning video.